Okay, buckle up, Reddit. This one's long, raw, and based on whispers on the wind. Names changed, locations blurred. But the feeling? That's real. Pour a drink. Settle in. This is Ivan's story. The mud. God, the fucking mud. That's what I remember first. Not the RPG blast that turned our BTR into a flaming sardine can. Not Sergeant Mikola's choked-off scream. Not even the searing pain in my leg when shrapnel decided to redecorate my calf. No. It was the suck of the black Ukrainian earth. Thick as tar and cold as a witch's heart. Pulling at my boots as I tried to crawl away from the burning wreckage. My name is Ivan Kovalenko. Or was. Sometimes, in the dark, I forget. I was a corporal in the 80th Air Assault Brigade. Now I was prey. The forest near Kremina, once our cover, became a cage. Snow mixed with sleet, stinging my face, blurring the frantic green shapes of my brothers disappearing into the pines. The Russians came like ghosts materializing from the mist, not the disorganized mobs we sometimes faced, but silent, efficient hunters. Spetsnaz, maybe, or just professionals having a very bad day, same as us. I dragged myself behind a fallen oak, fumbling for my rifle. Gone. Pistol? Lost in the scramble. All I had was a combat knife, the handle slick with mud and my own blood. Adrenaline screamed through me, a frantic counterpoint to the throbbing agony in my leg. Move, Ivan. Move or die. Too late. A boot slammed into my back, driving the air from my lungs and my face deeper into the freezing muck. Hands, rough and impersonal, rolled me over. The muzzle of a Kalashnikov, impossibly large, filled my vision. Behind it, eyes as flat and gray as the winter sky looked down at me. No hate, no anger, just assessment, like checking livestock. Podniatsia. Davy. Get up. Come on. The voice was guttural, devoid of inflection. They didn't bother binding me. Why would they? I could barely stand. They hauled me upright, my injured leg buckling instantly. A rifle but to the kidney punished the stumble, sending white-hot pain lancing through me. I choked back a cry. Don't give them the sound. That was lesson 1, drilled into us in basic training for this nightmare scenario. Deny them everything. Name, rank, serial number. Nothing more. They half-dragged, half-marched me through the skeletal trees. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by the crunch of boots on frozen ground, the ragged rasp of my own breath, and the relentless, sucking mud. We emerged into a scarred clearing, the remains of a village. Maybe. Charred timbers pointed accusingly at the sky. Waiting there was a battered Ural truck, canvas cover flapping like a wounded bird. That's where I saw the others. Petro, the young medic who always hummed folk songs under his breath, face swollen, one eye shut tight. Old man Lev, a reservist who should have been bouncing grandkids on his knee, not dodging artillery, shivering violently, his uniform dark with blood not his own. And Yana. Oh God, Yana, our drone operator, fierce and brilliant. Her left arm hung at a sickening angle, her face pale as death but her jaw set like granite. Our eyes met, a flicker of recognition, of shared despair. Then the terrifying blankness of survival mode descended. We were thrown into the back of the Ural like sacks of potatoes. The canvas flaps slammed down, plunging us into near darkness. The engine roared to life, a monstrous beast awakening, and we lurched forward. No one spoke. What was there to say? The reality was a physical weight crushing. Prisoners of war. Captured. Alive, but into what? The journey was a blur of jolting pain, cold that seeped into the marrow, and the suffocating smell of diesel, sweat, and fear. Hours? A day? Time lost meaning. We stopped abruptly. The canvas was thrown back. Harsh light stabbed our eyes. We were in a compound, high concrete walls topped with razor wire, watchtowers silhouetted against the bruised twilight sky. A former agricultural warehouse, maybe repurposed for human storage. The sign above the heavy steel door was crudely painted over, but the ghostly Cyrillic letters of its past life still bled through. Now it just said, Point 14. This was it. The gateway to hell. Processing was brutal. efficient. Stripped naked in a freezing concrete room. Hosed down with icy water that felt like needles. Searched with rough, invasive hands. Photographed. Fingerprinted. My dog tags were ripped from my neck, the thin metal chain snapping like a thread. They tossed them into a bucket with a metallic clatter, the sound of identities being discarded. We were issued ragged, mismatched uniforms, thin cotton that did nothing against the pervasive chill, and assigned numbers. I was number 147. We were herded into a large, open bay inside the warehouse. Rows of makeshift bunks, wooden pallets with thin, stained mattresses, filled the space. The air was thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, despair, and something else. A sharp, chemical tang of disinfectant that failed to mask the underlying rot. Dim bulbs hung from the high ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their expressions bored or openly hostile. Yana and the other women were taken somewhere else. The look she gave me as they led her away, not fear, but fierce defiance, was a small ember I clung to. Days bled into weeks, a crushing routine designed to break the spirit before breaking the body. Reveille. A guard pounding a metal pipe against the bars at 5 a.m. Instant panic, heart hammering. Roll call. Standing for hours in the freezing yard, counting and recounting, while guards screamed insults, doled out random punishments, push-ups in the mud, standing in a stressed position, or simply let us freeze. Breakfast. A lukewarm, greasy gruel that tasted like despair and lukewarm water, sometimes a stale piece of bread. Never enough. Work detail. Meaningless, back-breaking labor, digging holes only to fill them again. Moving heavy, rusted machinery parts from one end of the yard to the other and back. Scrubbing concrete floors with stiff brushes and dirty water until our hands bled. All under the watchful eyes and ready rifles of the guards. The purpose was exhaustion, humiliation, erasure, interrogation. Not every day, but often enough. This was the unpredictable terror. You never knew when your number would be called. They'd come for you, drag you from your bunk or the work line. The destination was always the same. The gray room. My first time in the gray room. Small. Concrete. A single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. A metal table. 2 chairs. One for them. One for me. No windows. The air tasted stale, metallic. 2 men entered. One, bulky, thick-necked, smelling of cheap tobacco and onions. He remained by the door, arms crossed. The other, thinner, with glasses and a deceptively calm demeanor, sat opposite me. He placed a file on the table. My file? Or just a prop? Ivan Kovalenko, he stated in accented but fluent Ukrainian. No rank, just the name. It sounded alien. Corporal, 80th Air Assault. Bravo Company. Tell me about your unit's deployment near Svatov. Name, rank, serial number. I rasped, my throat dry. That is all. The thin man sighed, almost theatrically. Ivan, this is unnecessary. We already know much. We just wish to confirm. Cooperation makes things easier. He opened the file. It was empty, just blank paper. A cheap trick. Tell me about your commanding officer. Captain Zahorodniak, yes? His tactics. His weaknesses. Name, rank, serial number. The bulky man by the door shifted. A subtle movement, but it sent a jolt of pure fear through me. The thin man steepled his fingers. Very well. Let's talk about something else. Your family. Your mother, Halina, lives in Lviv, yes? A beautiful city. Peaceful. For now. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. It would be a shame if disturbances reached such a peaceful place. The threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. My stomach clenched. Mom. I forced my face into a mask. Name, rank, serial number. The thin man's smile vanished. He nodded almost imperceptibly to the bulky one. The blow came from behind, a fist slamming into my kidney. I gasped, doubling over, pain exploding through my core. Before I could recover, A hand grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. The bulky guard's face was inches from mine, breath hot and foul. "Gavno Ukrainsko. Ukrainian shit," he spat. "Talk." They didn't ask questions again that session. It was just pain. Slaps that made my ears ring. Punches to the stomach, the ribs. Kicks to my injured leg when I fell. They worked methodically, silently except for grunts of effort and my own choked gasps. They avoided the face. Too obvious. The message was clear: we can hurt you. We can hurt you badly. We can make it stop. Just talk. I didn't talk. I curled into a ball, retreating into the smallest space inside my mind, repeating my name, rank, number like a mantra, clinging to the image of my mother's face, of sunflowers blooming in her garden back home. Sunflowers. Yellow against the blue sky. Warmth. Home. They dumped me back in the bay an hour later. Petro and Lev helped me to my bunk. No words, just shared understanding in their eyes. The price of silence. It was a currency we all paid sooner or later. Life in Point 14 became a grim calculus of endurance. Calories in versus calories burned. Hours of sleep versus hours of terror. The small acts of resistance that kept the soul alive. A shared crust of bread. A whispered joke. A song hummed so softly only the man on the next bunk could hear it. We learned to communicate with glances, subtle gestures. We learned the guards' routines, their tells. One guard stood out, not for cruelty, but for an unsettling stillness. His name patch read Volkov. Sergeant Volkov. He was older than most, maybe late 40s, with lines etched deep around his eyes and a close-cropped beard shot through with gray. He moved with a weary economy, rarely shouted, rarely interacted beyond the necessary commands. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, held a depth of exhaustion that mirrored our own. But something else too, a profound sadness, a haunted look. He was the one who usually oversaw the morning roll call in our section. While other guards strutted or sneered, Volkov just stood, watching. His gaze would sometimes linger, not with malice, but with a strange, unsettling curiosity. He noticed things, like the sunflower seed. It happened during a work detail, shifting sacks of rotten grain, likely meant for us later, from one storage shed to another. My hands were raw and bleeding. As I heaved a sack, something small and hard fell from a tear in the burlap and landed in the mud at my feet. A single, perfect sunflower seed. A tiny piece of home, of life before the war. Instinctively, before I could think, I bent and scooped it up, closing my fist around it. "You, number 147, what are you doing?" A younger guard, eager and vicious, barked, striding over. "What did you pick up? Show me." Panic froze me. Possessing anything unauthorized was punishable. Solitary. Reduced rations. Worse, I slowly opened my hand, the seed lying innocently on my filthy palm. The young guard sneered. "Trash. Stealing rations?" He raised his baton. "Stoy! Stop!" The voice was low, gravelly, but cut through the air like a knife. Sergeant Volkov stood a few meters away, his expression unreadable. He walked over, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. He looked at the seed in my hand, then up at my face. For a fleeting second, his eyes seemed to soften, almost recognize something. Then the shutters came down. He plucked the seed from my palm. Contraband. Confiscated. He turned to the young guard. "Back to work. All of you." He walked away, the seed disappearing into his pocket. I expected punishment later. None came, but I caught Volkov looking at me several times over the next few days. Not with suspicion, but with that same unsettling intensity. It unnerved me more than the random brutality. Then came the night of the storm. A true Ukrainian winter tempest, howling winds that shook the warehouse walls, driving sleet that found every crack, thunder that boomed like incoming artillery. The power flickered and died, plunging the bay into pitch darkness, broken only by the sporadic, terrifying flash of lightning. Fear, primal and suffocating, filled the space. Whispers of prayers, stifled sobs. The guards were jumpy, shouting orders, their flashlight beams cutting erratic swathes through the blackness. During a particularly violent thunderclap that shook the very foundations, chaos erupted. Someone screamed. Guards shouted, their lights swinging wildly. In the confusion, a figure stumbled against my bunk. I tensed, ready for a blow. Instead, something small and hard was pressed into my hand. A low voice, speaking Ukrainian with a thick, almost archaic rural accent, whispered directly into my ear, so fast I barely caught it. "Naboysha, Zberahe, Zerka. Don't be afraid. Keep it safe. Star." Then the figure was gone, melting back into the storm-charged darkness and the guards' frantic beams. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. I uncurled my fingers. In my palm lay not one, but 3 sunflower seeds. And clutched beside them, cold and small, was a tiny, crudely carved wooden star. A child's toy? I closed my fist tight, the rough edges of the star digging into my skin. Volkov? It had to be. That voice, the accent. It fit. But why? Was it a trap? Some sick mind game? Or something else? The word Zerka echoed. Star. A name? A code? The seeds' hope? A connection? The storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest inside my head. The impassive Russian sergeant who spoke Ukrainian like a peasant from the Carpathians? Who gave a prisoner seeds and a star? Nothing made sense. It was the first truly unexpected twist in this bleak narrative, and it terrified me more than the gray room. The seeds and the star became my secret burden. I hid them deep in a seam of my ragged trousers, a tiny, dangerous talisman. Volkov resumed his usual detached demeanor, but now, when our eyes met, there was a flicker, a question, a warning. I dared not acknowledge it. Days later, Petro broke. Not during interrogation, but during roll call. The young medic, his spirit eroded by pain, hunger, and the constant psychological torture, simply stopped. He stood frozen as the guard counted, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on some horror only he could perceive. When the guard yelled at him, he didn't react. The guard shoved him. Petro crumpled to the muddy ground like a puppet with its strings cut and began to sing. Not a folk song, a lullaby, soft, broken, achingly sweet. The song a mother might sing, about a little star watching over a sleeping child. Oi kodit son, kolo vikon. Oh, the dream walks by the windows. The guards were momentarily stunned into silence. Then laughter, cruel and jarring, erupted from some. Others looked uncomfortable. Sergeant Volkov stood rigid, his face like stone, but his hands, clenched at his sides, were white-knuckled. The singing guard, enraged by the perceived mockery, raised his boot. Dostatakno! Enough! Volkov's voice cracked like a whip. He stepped forward, his authority palpable. He's broken. Take him to the infirmary. Now. His tone brooked no argument. The younger guard hesitated, then lowered his boot, muttering. 2 others hauled Petro's limp, still whispering form away. That night, lying awake on my pallet, listening to the snores and whimpers of the damned, I traced the outline of the tiny wooden star hidden in my seam. Zerka, Petro's lullaby echoed in my mind. The dream walks by the windows. Was it connected? Was Zerka Petro's child? A sibling? Or just a coincidence? The next interrogation was different. It wasn't the thin man and the brute. It was Volkov. Alone. He escorted me to the gray room himself. The silence was heavier than usual. He didn't sit. He stood by the door, arms crossed, looking not at me, but at the bare concrete wall. Kovalenko, he said finally, still not looking at me. His Ukrainian was fluent, the rural accent more pronounced in the quiet room. The medic, Petro Boyko. Where is he from? My blood ran cold. A trap? To see if I'd reveal information? I give only name, rank, serial number, I said, my voice hoarse. Volkov turned then, his pale eyes locking onto mine. There was no threat there, only a profound, weary anguish. His song, Volkov said quietly. The lullaby, Oi Kodit Son. Is familiar. My daughter. She used to sing it. To her doll. The admission hung in the air, shocking in its vulnerability. A Russian sergeant sharing a memory of his child? With a Ukrainian prisoner? It defied all logic. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They broke him, like they break everything. Like they broke. He stopped himself, clenching his jaw. He looked down at his boots, then back up, his eyes searching mine. You have something. From the storm. Show me. My heart hammered. Deny? He knew. How? I hesitated, then slowly, cautiously, reached into the seam and pulled out the 3 seeds and the tiny wooden star. I held them out on my open palm. Volkov stared at them, not at the seeds but at the star. A tremor ran through him. He reached out, his calloused finger gently touching the rough carved points. His breath hitched. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Zerka, he whispered, the word thick with emotion. Her name was Zerka, little star. The pieces slammed together with brutal force. The Ukrainian accent. The seeds, sunflowers, Ukraine's symbol. The carved star. The lullaby. The profound sadness. Volkov wasn't just some Russian sergeant. You? I breathed, the realization dawning. You're not Russian. A bitter, humorless smile touched his lips. Born in Simferopol, 1979. When Crimea was Ukrainian. He spat the last word like a curse. My name isn't Volkov. It's Shevchenko. Dmytro Shevchenko. I was a history teacher. I taught children about Khmelnytsky, about Shevchenko the poet, about Ukraine. His voice cracked. Then 2014 happened. The little green men. The referendum. He made air quotes, the gesture dripping with venom. I refused to take their Russian passport. Spoke out. They came for me. Not to kill me. To use me. Fluent Ukrainian? Knowledge of the culture? Perfect for interrogation. For infiltration. They took me. Re-educated me in a camp near Rostov. Broke me. Offered a choice. Serve in a penal battalion on the front lines. Or use my skills here. They had leverage. His voice dropped to a tortured whisper. My wife. My daughter. Zerka. They were still in Simferopol. Hostages to my cooperation. He looked at the tiny star in my hand. I carved that for her. 5th birthday. The seeds from my mother's garden, near Yalta. Before she died. Before everything. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself. When I saw you pick up that seed, it was like seeing myself. Before they took everything. The storm. It was a moment of madness. Of remembering who I was. The unexpected twist wasn't just surprising. It was earth-shattering. My jailer was a fellow Ukrainian. A prisoner just like me, bound by invisible chains far stronger than the wire surrounding Point 14. The enemy wasn't always across the wire. Sometimes it wore the same uniform. The gray room became a confessional, a conspiracy chamber. Under the guise of extended interrogation, Dmytro Shevchenko, not Volkov, shared his nightmare. He confirmed Petro was from a village near Lviv. The lullaby was common there. He sketched the layout of Point 14. Guard rotations, the infirmary where Petro was sedated but alive, the location of the generator, the weakest points in the perimeter fence near the old compost heaps, partially obscured by debris. He also confirmed the darker rumors. Prisoners were disappearing, not just from beatings or neglect. Selected individuals were taken at night, never returning. For prisoner exchanges? Unlikely. For propaganda videos? Sometimes. But whispers pointed to something worse. A filtration camp deeper in occupied territory, or worse, execution pits. The clock was ticking for all of us, Petro especially. We need to get out, I whispered, the plan forming like ice in my gut. All of us, or as many as possible. Dmytro shook his head, his face grim. Impossible. The perimeter patrols dogs after dark. The storm, I insisted. Another big one is coming. The weather radio in the commandant's office. I heard them talking. 3 days. A blizzard. Visibility near zero. Is our only chance. He stared at me, calculating. The ghost of the history teacher, the father, warring with the broken sergeant. Even in a storm, it's suicide. They shoot on sight. Better than dying here, or disappearing, or watching Petro fade away. I leaned forward. You have access. Keys. Schedules. You know the blind spots. We create a diversion. During the storm. Something big. Fire. The generator is old. Faulty. You told me yourself. He flinched. Arson? They'll execute everyone they catch. They'll execute us anyway. Eventually. My voice rose slightly, and I forced it down. Dmitro. Shevchenko. Think of Zerka. Is this the man she sings the lullaby to? A jailer? Or is he the father who carved her a star? Help us. Help yourself. The mention of his daughter was the key. His resolve hardened, the haunted look replaced by a desperate determination. The generator shed. It's near the compost area. Fence is weak there. I can arrange a fuel leak during the storm, but the fire needs to start after the diversion, to draw them away from the fence. The plan was insane, fragile, doomed, but it was a plan. We spent the next 2 days in stolen moments, refining it. I would spread the word to the most trustworthy prisoners, Lev, a few others who still had fire in their eyes. Absolute secrecy. We would target the next blizzard. The signal would be Dmitro leaving the generator shed door slightly ajar during the evening headcount. We would create a disturbance in the main bay, a staged fight, loud enough to pull guards inside. During the chaos, the strongest would rush the generator shed, use the leaked fuel and a hidden spark, a smuggled piece of flint Dmitro provided, to ignite it. While the fire drew guards towards the compound center, the rest would make for the weak fence near the compost heaps. Dmitro would create an opportunity to get Petro out of the infirmary during the initial diversion. He would meet us at the fence. The night of the blizzard arrived with a vengeance. Snow fell not in flakes, but in thick, relentless curtains, driven by a wind that screamed like the damned. Visibility dropped to mere feet. The power flickered ominously. Tension in the bay was a live wire. Lev gave me a barely perceptible nod. Petro, weak but conscious, had been moved to a bed near the door, per Dmitro's arrangement. Head count. Guards were edgy, stamping snow from their boots. Dmitro, Volkov, moved along the rows, his face a mask. As he passed the end of my row, near the bay door leading to the yard, his hand brushed the door handle. It didn't latch properly. The signal. Moments later, chaos erupted. Lev stumbled deliberately into a larger prisoner from another bunk. Accusations flew. Shoves escalated into a roaring, swirling melee involving a dozen men near the center of the bay. Guards shouted, wading in with batons, trying to separate them. The noise was perfect cover. I moved. So did 3 others, burly Andriy, silent Taras, and wiry Nazar. We slipped out the slightly open door into the blinding, howling maelstrom of the storm. The cold was a physical assault, stealing our breath. Snow instantly caked our faces. We crouched, orienting ourselves. The generator shed was a dark shape to our left. We moved low and fast, the wind covering our sounds. The shed door was unlocked. Inside, the roar of the aging diesel generator was deafening. The smell of fuel oil was overpowering. A dark, viscous puddle glistened on the concrete floor near the fuel line connection. Dmitro's leak. Nazar, our designated fire starter, fumbled with the flint and a piece of steel wool Dmitro had provided. Sparks flew, died in the damp air. Again. Outside, the sounds of the fight in the bay were fading. Guards were restoring order. We were running out of time. Nazar cursed, striking the flint desperately. A spark caught the steel wool, flaring into a tiny, brilliant ember. He touched it to the edge of the fuel puddle. Nothing. The fuel was cold, thick. The ember died. Panic surged. Andriy grabbed an oily rag from a workbench, thrust it at Nazar. Again. Quick! Nazar wrapped the rag around the steel wool, struck the flint. Sparks flew onto the rag. It smoldered, then caught with a sudden whoosh of flame. He threw the burning rag onto the fuel puddle. This time, the fire took hold, blue and yellow flames licking hungrily across the floor, racing towards the generator housing. Go! Go! I yelled over the generator's roar and the growing crackle of fire. We scrambled out, slamming the door shut behind us. Already, the smell of burning oil was mixing with the snow. We ran back towards the bay door, just as guards began pouring out, alerted by the smoke now visible even in the blizzard. Fire! Generator shed. A guard bellowed. Alarms started clanging, a harsh, mechanical sound cutting through the storm's wail. Guards ran towards the shed, shouting orders, pulling fire extinguishers. Chaos engulfed the yard. Now, this was the moment. I burst back into the bay. Go! Go! Now! To the fence! Compost heap! I roared, pointing. The prisoners, primed and ready, didn't hesitate. A wave of desperate men surged towards the open bay door and into the blinding snowstorm, heading for the far corner of the compound. I looked for Dimitro and Petro. Through the swirling snow near the infirmary entrance, I saw them. Dimitro was half-carrying Petro, struggling towards the main stream of escaping prisoners. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the commandant's office, the thin interrogator. He saw Dimitro supporting Petro, clearly not acting as a guard. His eyes widened in understanding. He raised his pistol. "Traitor!" he screamed, his voice shrill against the wind. Dimitro shoved Petro towards me with surprising strength. "Take him! Run!" The interrogator fired. Once, twice. Dimitro staggered, a dark stain blossoming on his chest. He didn't fall. Instead, with a roar that sounded more like grief than pain, he lunged at the interrogator, tackling him into the snow just as the man fired a third wild shot. "Dimitro!" I screamed. Petro sagged against me. Dimitro and the interrogator wrestled in the snow, a chaotic tangle of limbs. More guards were converging, drawn by the shots. I saw Dimitro raise his head, his eyes finding mine through the blizzard. He yelled something, but the wind snatched the words away. Then he slammed his head forward, a brutal headbutt that stunned the interrogator. With his last strength, he grabbed the man's pistol hand, forcing it upwards just as another guard raised his rifle. A shot rang out. Dimitro's body jerked. He went limp. The price, paid in full. "Ivan, move!" Lev grabbed my arm, pulling me and Petro towards the fleeing mass of prisoners, disappearing into the white chaos near the compost heaps. The weak fence section was already being torn apart by desperate hands. Guards, distracted by the fire and the sheer number of escaping prisoners, fired wildly into the storm, but the visibility was near zero. We stumbled through the gap in the fence, the razor wire tearing at our clothes and skin. Then we were out, into the open, snow-choked field beyond. Freedom was a howling, frozen void. We ran, stumbling, falling, dragging Petro into the teeth of the blizzard, leaving the flames of Point 14 and the broken body of Dmitro Shevchenko behind. The escape was a nightmare odyssey. The blizzard saved us and nearly killed us. We moved only at night, navigating by the faint glow of the snow and distant, hopefully Ukrainian artillery flashes. By day, we burrowed into snowdrifts, huddled together for warmth, sharing body heat and the meager rations Dmitro had managed to smuggle to us before the escape, hardtack and strips of dried meat. Petro worsened. Infection set into his injuries. Lev, despite his age, proved incredibly resilient, his knowledge of the land invaluable. Not all of us made it. Taras succumbed to hypothermia on the third night. Nazar stepped on a mine near a deserted village, a sickening, echoing blast in the silent dawn. After 8 days of freezing hell, driven by desperation and the fading ember of hope Dmitro had reignited, we stumbled into a Ukrainian forward observation post. Skeptical, heavily armed soldiers emerged from a camouflaged bunker. We must have looked like ghosts risen from the snow, emaciated, frostbitten, half dead. I could barely speak, my voice a frozen rasp. I just held out my dog tags, the ones they'd taken, miraculously retrieved by Dmitro and slipped to me during our last planning session. Ivan Kovalenko, Corporal, 80th Air Assault. I managed before darkness swallowed me. I woke up in a real bed, clean sheets, warmth, the hum of medical equipment, a nurse with kind eyes, Lviv, a military hospital. Petro was alive, receiving treatment. Lev was recovering, already telling his story to SBU officers. Yana had survived point 14. She'd been transferred before the escape. I learned this later. Debriefings were long, arduous. I told them everything. About point 14, the gray room, the disappearances, the escape plan, and Dmytro Shevchenko, the Ukrainian history teacher from Crimea forced to become Sergeant Volkov. I told them about the seeds, the tiny wooden star, the lullaby, the sacrifice. The SBU officers listened intently, their expressions grim but interested. They knew of Volkov, a figure noted for unusual behavior patterns. My testimony gave him a name, a story, a humanity stripped away by occupation. They asked about the star. I still had it, clutched in my hand when they found us. The seeds were long gone, lost in the snow. I handed the rough little carving over. Evidence. Proof of a stolen life, a stolen identity, a stolen father. Months passed. Healing was slow. Physical wounds mend. The gray room stays with you. Petro recovered, though his eyes held a permanent distance. Lev returned to his grandchildren, a quiet hero. Yana and we found solace in shared trauma, a deep, unspoken understanding. We talked sometimes late at night about the mud, the cold, the fear, and about the sunflower seed, the unexpected act of kindness in hell. One day, an SBU officer visited me. He handed me a small, official-looking envelope. Inside wasn't paperwork, but a photograph. A color print, slightly faded. It showed a man in his late 30s, smiling warmly, holding a little girl of about 5 on his shoulders. The girl was beaming, clutching a crudely carved wooden star in her hand. On the back, in neat Ukrainian script, Dmytro and Zherka. Yalta, May 2013. We found his wife, the officer said quietly. In Estonia. She escaped Crimea with Zherka in 2015. They're safe. We told her about Dmytro, what he did. At the end. He paused. She wanted you to have this, she said. She said she always knew the man she loved was still in there somewhere. The star proved it. I stared at the photo. The smiling man bore little resemblance to the haunted Sergeant Volkov, except for the eyes. The same pale blue, but in this photo, they shone with love, not despair. Zherka's smile was radiant. I traced the outline of the star in the photo, then touched the real one, now worn smooth from my constant handling, resting on my bedside table beside a single, dried sunflower head I'd asked a nurse to find. The war grinds on. Darkness still covers much of the land. But Dmytro Shevchenko, the teacher from Simferopol, the father who carved a star, the man who chose to remember who he was in the face of annihilation, he showed me something. Evil tries to erase. It tries to dehumanize, to reduce us to numbers, to mud, to broken songs. But it can't extinguish the spark. The tiny seed of defiance, of memory, of love. It can't erase the sunflower that pushes through the churned earth after the tanks have passed. It can't silence the lullaby sung in the dark. I keep the photo and the star together. A reminder, not just of the cost, but of the resilience. The unexpected twists aren't always cruel. Sometimes, they're a flicker of light in the deepest storm. A sunflower seed pressed into your hand by the enemy who was never your enemy at all. A reminder that home, identity, love, these are things even the gray room cannot truly take. They are carried inside, seeds waiting for the thaw. Ivan Kovalenko is still here. And somewhere, safe, Zherka Shevchenko holds a memory of her father. And maybe, just maybe, she still sings the lullaby about the little star. Slava Ukraini. Glory to Ukraine.